Sorry. Morning, everybody. I've got a singing son this morning. Hello.
Hello, good morning, Dr. Anderson.
Goodbye, Leif. I can drink coffee without a mask like this, see?
It's weird seeing you without a mask.
Yeah, I'll bet. It's weird seeing all of you, too. Those of you that have allowed me to see you, I mean. All right, let's see. Who else do we have here? All right, looks like we're just waiting for one, so I'll get started. Welcome to the live from the Bonderson kitchen. Choral Methods. Thanks for doing this version today. Moving forward, I'll just remind you in an email beforehand of those days when I'd really like to hold the class like this. And then I'm just going to put every single class period on Zoom anyway for anybody that needs to join us in that fashion. So, but days that we're going to do everybody like this, I'll just make sure you know about it. So what I'd like you to have is a combination of things. If you have access to, which most of you are on one now, I think, if you have access to your emails, either via computer, laptop, or phone, I sent you a Google form this morning that will replace the choral music analysis sheet, the hard copy that I handed out in class. So I'm going to make reference to that occasionally, and I'll probably use my share screens, you know, for all of you that do not have the document. But you all have been sent that document now. And then I'd like you to have access to that choral music analysis form if you received it in class, and America the Beautiful, and Shoshone Love Song, which was that blue covered piece that I passed out to you, and then your textbook. So I'll just be making references to all of those things kind of at once. So the first thing I'd like to do today with you is let's go through America the Beautiful and fill out the analysis form. And I'm going to be going back and forth between the hard copy and the newer form. But I'm going to try to enable my screen share here. And we'll just have to see if I can get that to work. So let's see. All right, here we go. I'll get there in just a minute. Here we go. Okay. Looks like I lost the, oh, there you are. Sorry, I've got my screen so low that I can't see anything. My sound is still on, by the way. I'm just experiencing some issues. Okay. Yes, can you see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, finally. I had it up there the whole time and just couldn't see it. So this is the form that you'll be using to fill out for each of the pieces in that booklet, that sight reading booklet that I showed you, and that you all have a copy of, and that we'll use today for America the Beautiful. So I'm going to, if you can all see this, I'm going to just go through it with you. You can see obviously that you fill out your name, the title of the piece. Here I would put, of course, America the Beautiful, and going down to the composer arrangement. Is this scrolling down for you?
Yes.
Great. And in the case of America the Beautiful, we're using what is called a public domain piece. Now, there's lots of public domain sites like cpdl.org, which some of you who are in choir know that I take some classical music, everything from medieval through contemporary music that is not currently on copyright, is hosted on that site. So we'll talk about that site specifically for some of the resources for all of you to get music. Basically, you can find, let's say you find a Palestrina motet in 4 parts. It's probably the very same arrangement that you might purchase $2 a copy for or more. And because Palestrina's music is out of copyright, you can download it free and print as many copies as you want for no cost. And it's a very economical way of expanding your choral library and having access to some music that you wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. So that's called public domain, meaning that there are no copyright infringement policies, and you can copy as you want. America the Beautiful is under that system. So the copy that I provided to you, even if it comes out of a hymnal or whatever, is free of copyright. So that's what I would be looking at here, composer arrangement. At the very bottom, if you see, do you see on the left, at the bottom it says words and music? Are those the copies that you have? On the bottom it says Samuel Ward. That's the person who would go in here. He's the composer of the tune and probably the arranger of the chorale or the hymn-like arrangement. Voicing, you see that I have written, am I still on? I just had an unstable, okay, things are back on. Uh, Under voicing, voicing means how many voice parts are there and what is the scoring for it. It's like an orchestral score, a band score. Some of them have flutes and some of them don't, or some, that's the way it is for the choral score. So, and these are the shorthand designations for the voices. There are only four: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And I think I've accounted for most of the voicings, all of them probably, that you're going to encounter in that ACDA booklet. But soprano, alto, soprano, soprano, alto, soprano, soprano, alto, alto. So four-part women, anything from two-part to four-part women. Same thing for men. Tenor is for bass, or tenor is for tenor. T is for tenor. Wow, I'm having trouble this morning. More coffee. T is for tenor, B is for bass. And then you see up to four-part men's. Soprano, alto, bass, that's the most compact, mixed kind of a voice designation, and usually that bass is a very limited range. In an SAB part, it's usually baritone or barytenor for just changing voices. And then soprano, alto, tenor, bass is the designation that you would check for America the Beautiful. I've got an 8-part designation there, SSAATTBB, which means there's a S1, S2, tenor 1, tenor, that kind of thing. So you've got a higher of each part, higher and lower of each part. Other is there because there might be some variant of that. There is soprano tenor music, there is alto tenor bass music, there's SSATB music, all sorts of other parts, and you can fill that in if you have a piece that calls for that. So voicing just means, as it says, what are the parts? How many parts are there, and what are they designated? There are some pieces that you will encounter not in the booklet or any of the music that I've handed out so far, but there's something called C, which is cambiata, and that part is a part that's written for sort of mutating, as they call it, or changing male voices with very limited ranges, or female voices that also are changing and have very limited ranges. So it's kind of a tweener part, like a tenor or an alto, but only has maybe a, believe it or not, 3 to 5 note range. But it still enables those students to participate in multiple part choral music. And you can buy this specifically written for cambiata voices, and I'll show you at a later time how to access that. So then you go to publisher and catalog number. This is not appropriate for this particular arrangement because it's public domain, so there's no publisher. But the number will be, and I'll show you that if you have your Shoshone Love Song piece handy, you'll see on the bottom that it says Hal Leonard Corporation. Hal Leonard is one of the big companies that publishes choral music, and it publishes band music and orchestral music as well, but especially choral music. That would be the publisher. And then up on the top left, you'll see an 8-digit number, which is their catalog number, and that's 08754242. If I were evaluating this piece, those are the two things that I'd write in this space: Hal Leonard, and then 08754242. And the reason that's important is because enter that number, and the title will come up, and the right designation. I mean, all of these pieces are cataloged by whichever publisher. So that's what would go in there. But with America the Beautiful, nothing. You just leave it blank. Range. Let's look at each of the parts. And so I've put a long answer text in here. And so what I would like you to do is we've already checked SATB. This is a 4-part piece. And you may enter on range soprano, colon, or dash. And then we're going to put in the lowest pitch first to the highest pitch. So, and then when you finish that, you'll push the return button, and you could do it twice if you want to, so there's a space between them. Then you do alto, colon, or dash, and put the lowest pitch to the highest pitch, and then you'd push the return button, put tenor and bass, and so on. So all of that's going to go into range, and remember that range is the absolute lowest pitch printed in the part to the absolute highest pitch printed in the part. So going through the soprano, peruse your score, and looking in America the Beautiful, and if you're looking at your music, what is the highest pitch written for the soprano part? Anybody? Anybody?
D5, right?
C5.
What 5?
C as in cat.
Yeah. There is a D, actually. There's a D5. If you look at above the fruited plane, it goes up to D there. You see that?
Yes, and it also does it on the America.
Right. So that's the highest pitch is D5. What's the absolute lowest pitch that the soprano sings? The soprano line.
F4.
Isn't it C4?
No, it's D.
C4.
C4.
Yes, it's C4. So middle C, majesties, on the second line. You see middle C, which is C4. So then, at range for this piece, I put soprano dash C4 is the lowest pitch to D5. Okay? So if we just all are aware of that formula for how to enter this, it's the lowest pitch first and then the highest pitch. And we're using that octave system so that you don't have to use a written staff. And that way we don't have to do that. So then we go through the next one, and we return button on our computer, and we enter alto dash. And then we do the same thing for this. So I'm just going to look through that alto part, and you'll see that the lowest pitch is A3. Okay, so the A below middle C. And you'll see that the highest pitch is B flat 4. So that's what you put. And where I'm finding some of these is on the penultimate or the second to the last measure of the piece, where everybody's in unison, because for the altos and for the basses, those represent the highest pitches of the piece. And so when you're assessing a piece like this, you have to look for unisons, because it's easy to see, okay, I can see the bass or I can see the alto or whatever, when all 4 parts are singing and it looks like there's 4 distinct parts. But remember that in a unison, that's also part of their part. So that's where sometimes the high pitches will come from for the lower parts, alto and bass, and sometimes that's where the higher parts will come from I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The lower parts will come from the tenor and the soprano, and the highest parts in the pitch in the range will come from alto and bass. So that's what I'd write, is A3 to B flat 4. Then I'd return right tenor dash. I'd put F3 to C4. And then for the bass, I'd put low F2 to B flat 3. So the basses actually have the highest range in the piece. Then I go down to tessitura, I've finished with ranges, and all those are 2 notes for each voice part, lowest to highest. Then I do the same thing for tessitura. Now, tessitura is kind of an estimate. So sometimes tessitura and range are the same. And let's go to the voice part where that's the case. It's the tenor. So the tenors almost always sing almost the fully inflated F to C. If you look at the tenor line, they hang around B flat, down to F. End of the first line, they sing that middle C, and they're around A, B, down to F again. See, it's just outlining that F to C. Now, an argument could be made that maybe it's F to B flat. But the point is that's as close to, a choral part having the tessitura and the range almost identical as you can really get. So that's what I would suggest for that tessitura. So I'll go back. Starting with sopranos, tessitura, I would estimate that the lowest pitch is F4 and the highest pitch is C5. This is an estimate. This is not a de facto. We can all be off by a step or so. But the idea is that I'd like you to acknowledge that when you're looking for the tessitura of a part, it's the interval, the approximate interval between which most of the part lies. Okay, so you're throwing out the highest pitches and the lowest pitches, unless they're commonly sung, like they are in the tenor. So, as I said then, I have written that the soprano tessitura is F4 to C5. I have written that the alto tessitura is C4 or middle C to approximately F4, the F above it, where that's mostly where the part lies. Tenor, as I've said, I think they're the same, F3 to C4. And then basses, there's really a kind of a lot of discrepancy could be had if we all offer our opinion. I think it's either, for the lowest pitch, it's either B flat 2 or C2. And then I think the highest pitch is either A3 or B flat 3. So somewhere in there, which of these, if you use my designation, well, you may not have written them down, but if you didn't, the part where the tessitura and the range are the most similar, we've already said the tenor. What other part, using the notes that I've given you, are pretty close, where the tessitura is fairly large? There's only one other one. That's the bass. Because if we use the widest notes that I said are possible, B flat 2 to A or to B flat 3, that's almost as big as F2 to B flat 3. So the bass line is probably more challenging than the tenor. Why? Because the range is bigger. And if the tessitura is close to a big range, that puts more strain on the voice because they're singing a wider range more of the time. Even though the tenor range and the tessitura are almost identical or are identical, it's a very limited range. It's a perfect fifth. So this is an evaluative aspect that you'll learn. That means that the bass part is a little more challenging for those guys than the tenor part is for those guys, or that the alto part is for those gals, or then the soprano part is for those gals, because the tessitura is rather compact. Okay, so then we go down and we look at language. Basically, I just want you to say which language is the piece written in. This is written in English. You might want to mention here that Catherine Lee Bates is the author of this English text, only because it's an American piece that also has a historical connotation, and that Bates' poetry is considered to be a snapshot of the era that this was written. But that's what this is for. English. If it's not in English, are there translation pronunciation guides in the edition? That's important because you are very likely the authority, and if you, meaning that you're not going to have somebody that is Latvian in your choir probably, unless you have a foreign exchange student, or German or Spanish. Spanish being more accessible language to more people, but the point is, for most of us who don't speak multiple languages, is there a translation? Is there a pronunciation guide? And is there International Phonetic Alphabet? And some of you know exactly what that means. It's just the symbols that in any language represent the same sounds. And some of you that don't have or that haven't had any training on that, that'll be a very useful tool, which I'll briefly introduce later. But is there a tool for you to realize the pronunciation with your students? And then is there a background? Is there any information about historical, I don't know, origins for text, for the tune? Is it an ancient tune that's been reset? Is there a story about the piece? Shoshone Love Song, for example, is a Native American text that has a story behind it. And is there any information about that? So that's what goes there. Written dynamic range is what in the piece is indicated. So in this arrangement of America the Beautiful, what are the dynamics? What are the written dynamics?
There are none.
There are none. That's what you'd write. None written. Then the drop down or the check boxes for characteristics of the vocal lines. So I've included some that I'd like you to identify. You know, do the lines move by step? Narrow interval, scalar we call it. Are the intervals wide? Are they angular by leaps up or down? Are they mixed, meaning that sometimes those intervals are there and sometimes, it's a combination of the two. And then other I've just left because there can be really extremes on either category. I mean, for instance, there are parts that are in a minimalist piece, let's say, where you keep repeating the same pitch over and over and over again. So how do you describe that? Well, you're going to have to mention that maybe it's chant, or maybe the parts are aleatoric, meaning that you are given a basic outline, and then it's up to you. It's up to the singers to improvise on that and even create their own, because there is music like that too. So you might indicate that at this point. Then I'd like you to identify the key center and just a harmonic framework. I don't expect you to analyze the piece harmonically. So, for example, this arrangement, this hymn-like arrangement of America, is common practice in B-flat major, common practice in quotes, meaning that we have a tonic that is diatonically based, and that the typical progression in this is something like 1-4-5, 1-2-5-1, or 5-7-1, something that is very, perfect authentic cadence, that kind of thing, or not surprising. It's not atonal. It is not. There's no modulation other than maybe a secondary dominant. There is no. Some of you just sang a piece in choir in which we sang in a minor key, and then we immediately moved to the tonic major, and then we went back to the tonic minor. I mean, that's the kind of thing. If that makes an appearance, that's what you would enter here. Composer makes use of the tonic major from the tonic minor in G minor or something. So again, not a huge deal, but I want you to have some assessment so that you know the difficulty of presentation to your students. I mean, if you've got something that modulates every few bars, that's a very difficult piece. If it's something like this, it's the simpler form of a hymn style or four-part arrangement. And then rhythmic figures, what kind of complexities are evident in the score? Simple dotted rhythms with a few syncopations or easier. Use of 16th notes, ties, rests, some syncopations, that's more moderate. When we start to, subdivide the beats or variations of those subdivisions, increase the syncopation, maybe rests are used a little more so that entrances are made on the offbeats. That's more difficult, right? And then complex subdivisions of the beats, ties, rests, syncopations, and subdivision of a single beat multiple ways, triplets, duplets, multiple other subdivisions that maybe go back and forth. That's when the rhythmic subdivisions and rhythms themselves become sophisticated. And higher sight reading skills and higher just music skills in general are going to be needed to realize the piece. Overall form of the piece, that is what it is. Let's look at America the Beautiful, and let's look at it rhythmically first, because I think that's very interesting. If we look at, it's kind of difficult to see at first glance, because in this arrangement, the measures or the phrases are not on one line. For instance, you sing, "Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain." Well, the ending of that phrase is down on the next line. So it's harder to see this. And then you say the next phrase, "For purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain." Well, now that phrase goes to the second measure of the third line. So you can't see the symmetry as easy in the way this is written out. But if it were written out symmetrically, what we'd see is this. And to cut to the chase, the next phrase has the identical rhythm. So the next, "For purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain." Then if I go to the chorus, we have, like I just used, a chorus that ends the piece. So there are two identical rhythmic structures in each of the first two phrases. So we have an AA, right, with kind of a B chorus. And the chorus is really kind of a variation on an A structure. So the point is that we have essentially an AAB form, and it's strophic because the words repeat on identical music. So it's ironic, I have short answer text. I just gave you the long answer. Short answer would be use some letters to describe the form and then use a word like strophic, okay? And then the final answer, and I've included a long answer option there. I just don't want you to run out of space. But would you use the piece? And your answer can be no. Your answer can be yes. But I'd like you to justify that. Why would you? Why wouldn't you? It's a good this or it's a good that. Maybe what are some reasons you would choose not to use a piece? And I'm not talking about America the Beautiful. Any piece that you look at. What could be some reasons that you wouldn't use the piece?
Well, first thing comes to mind is range. If it has a really wide range, then that could be cause for concern.
Yeah, range and or really wide tessitura, yeah. What else?
For balance, like if the alto part's really important, but you have 5 altos and 3 of them sing loud, probably shouldn't pick that one.
Yeah, maybe balance. That's a good one. What else?
Maybe it doesn't help your students learn something that you're trying to learn. For example, if you were trying to teach your students dynamics, you probably wouldn't want to pick this version of America the Beautiful because there are no dynamics written. There is no range.
Yeah, particularly if you want them to relate the dynamics that are typically written in a score to realizing them. On the other hand, as a template, and if you just use this arrangement as an etude, as a training piece, you could then change the dynamics with them on a regular basis and then practice, establishing, let's sing this phrase forte. Oh, this time let's mark in pianissimo or whatever. You could also use that as a strength. What's another reason that you, and again, I'm going away from the example of America the Beautiful. Well, there's actually, I guess, some text reasons in this too that I might choose not to use one of the verses. But text, right? I mean, what are some texts that you might reject? In any given piece?
Well, we do have to monitor for the separation of church and state and walk that line carefully. So we'd have to evaluate for that. But on the other hand, you also have the difficulty if it's in a foreign language. If you have singers that maybe can't handle an advanced language yet, then you might not want to do that piece.
Yeah, those are all good. The religious language is a biggie, and particularly if the religious language comes from a point of view, a dogmatic point of view, or it's maybe worship music that's used in churches that is completely Christian centric. For example, I'll use that religion as an example, that talks about the blood of the lamb and imagery that is very specific. If it's imagery from other non-Christian religions that is promoting a particular point of view. But in this country, some of you may end up in school districts, and maybe some of you were raised in places like this, where any sacred references will not be allowed to be promoted within the district. And I'm thinking particularly of some of the West Coast schools, Portland, Seattle. Most of the friends that I have that teach in the public schools over the years in those districts do not program sacred music, and they choose to program other things. And even I, here at the university, I'm careful to program sacred music relating to historical performance practice, meaning maybe mass settings, motet settings in English or Latin that come from a canon of historically, I guess, used works over history. For instance, the music of Palestrina, of De Lasso, of Bach, of Handel, of Hindemith, or whoever the composer is, Stravinsky, that has set, for instance, mass text. That can be justified on historical grounds. And then the manner in which we use the text in the classroom, we have to be careful about that too, in the manner that it's promoted, that it's related specifically and only to the music being studied. I mean, if I was if I asked my choir to learn a setting of part of the Quran, it would have the same guidelines. I mean, I would be amiss if I started to promote the belief systems or the imagery as literal of the Quran, of Christian scriptures, of Buddhist, whatever the point of view is. That's not what we're teaching. What we're teaching is the music and its historical relevance or its cultural relevance, because there are reasons to study the music that may have a Buddhist text. There are reasons for us to take a Hindu piece and learn it. There are reasons to learn a spiritual that has sacred text, but maybe is from an African American work song, or there are absolute justifications for that. But this is something that is a hot topic for our discussions this semester, because of the wide variety of the school districts that some of you may find yourself in, if not initially, at some point in your career. I taught at Pullman, Washington as one of my high school positions, and I had some of these same issues there, because even though Pullman was in the western part of, or the eastern part, I'm sorry, of Washington, right on almost on the border with Idaho, the city itself was quite liberal and quite progressive in terms of its thought, being a university town. So the high school was influenced by that, and I was very careful with my texts in that particular place. Other places, if you grow up in Libby, Montana, for example, or other very rural places in Idaho, you can pretty well program a candlelight service on Christmas Eve, and your community may support that. And then you just have to, then that issue would be one of personal integrity, and your educator hat would be on. And so you would be the one that would need to, set your own standards for that, because perhaps the community would allow a different paradigm in your programming. But obviously, it's just brought up a huge issue, and but that might be a reason to accept or reject text that uses the imagery, and I'll just keep on that Christian because it's easy for all of us to relate to, at least in the country that we live. Very dogmatic texts, for example, things that might be used in a fundamentalist sort of a congregational singing, that would not probably be appropriate to be bringing into the classroom to teach as a choral piece. So there, I think I've spent enough time on that. So there are other reasons, you've all mentioned them, musical ones, vocal ones. What are some reasons that you might choose a piece that might be slightly above the ability levels of your students?
To help them to grow on that particular aspect.
Yeah. To help them develop skills, right? Maybe the rhythmic language is a little more sophisticated than what you've been programming with your students. Well, let's see if they can grow in that area. Maybe they've never sung a modal piece. Maybe they've never been confronted with chromaticisms. Chromaticisms are a different ballgame, aren't they, than singing diatonic major and minor intervals. So, yeah, that's good. So, are there any questions about, not so much about the far afield discussions, but about this form specifically, and how then you would use it? Yes, Veronica.
When we fill this out and we say, yes, I choose this for my choir, or no, do you have any specific guidelines about what pretend choir we're choosing it for?
I don't. At this point, you would have to probably use some hypotheticals like if my choir were blah, 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 if my choir were blah, blah, blah. But you're also, that's a great question because you're not able to dismiss these pieces. I mean, you wouldn't say no in the case of a difficult piece because you don't have a real choir that that you're picking this for. The idea is that you're assessing pieces of varied difficulties. So I suppose that you might support your choice of the piece for, the melody is beautiful. The harmonic language offers variety of colors and blah, 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 so forth. Language could be a reason to accept, and it could also be a reason to reject. Really lousy poetry, whether it's in English or anything else, especially English, it's a lot easier to cover poetic sins if it's in a foreign language to our English-speaking students. But there's no reason to pick lousy text in a world in which there are so many choices. I mean, that's part of our education too. That's part of the way we're educating our students is the high quality of, in my opinion, the higher quality of a text that we choose. On the other hand, that wouldn't be a reason to reject a pop medley, right? I mean, if you've got a specific town and gown thing or an event that your students are going to sing for, a pops concert in your school, you're not going to be picking the poetry of Keats and Shelley for those, right? I mean, so yeah. So do your best with that. It would be a lot easier to reject or to even probably promote that you'd want a piece of music if, hey, that would be perfect for my group. But you could state, this would be a great piece to teach X, Y, or Z. Or this would be a great piece if I had a beginning girls group just learning to read, harmonize, and the ranges are close enough to each other that I could switch the voice parts. That would be a good justification. I would put the altos on soprano and I could put the sopranos on alto because the ranges are limited, and that would allow all of them to, part sing and that sort of thing. Okay. So any other questions about this specific form and how it could be used? Great. So to test this out then, I'd like each of you to use Shoshone Love Song, and I'd like you to fill out one of these forms and send it to me. Since I think everybody has the music, and if you don't, I'll get you the copy in the next class. But I just want you to go through it with a sort of dry run. And Shoshone Love Song is really straightforward. The form is very simple, just FYI, if you haven't already read through it. The parts are very limited, and it's strophic. It's as strophic as it gets. So all the materials are quite limited. The rhythms are very straightforward, and they are also repetitive. So do your best with that. And there's one other assignment, and this I'd like to be completed before Thursday to get us into Shoshone Love Song, which we're then going to use so that I can introduce you to choral rehearsal techniques. Besides the analysis of the piece, I'd like you to look up where the text comes from. Just Google it. You can either use Shoshone Love Song and or The Heart's Friend. And I think you'll find some information that I'd like to discuss in our next class, which will also be via Zoom. So we will on Thursday meet in the same way and go over some of these ideas in the Shoshone Love Song. Ideally, I'd like you to have that choral music analysis sheet done as well, because I'd like to talk about that. because these choral music analysis sheets and your evaluation of all this music is going to be the way that you prepare for your rehearsals. And so I want to make it as useful as possible. And okay, any questions about Thursday?
Not necessarily about Thursday, but for the form that we've been filling out for America the Beautiful, do we need to turn that into you? Since we've been doing this as
No.
a class.
No. That's your model. So you don't, that is just a freebie. So use that if you have questions about, how do I fill this in for Shoshone Love Song or anything else that's in that booklet. And so use it that way. And then I will give a little bit more specific instructions about the pieces that are in your ACDA sight reading session book. And I think I've already sent out to everybody, and let me know if you don't have it, but the YouTube links to the pieces that I've taken from that, you should have those so that you can access. But other than that, I'll see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.